The 12 tribes are 144,000. We are first introduced to the 144,000 in Revelation 7 verses 3 to 8, and then again in Revelation 14 verses 1 to 5. In chapter 7 we are told they were sealed in their foreheads, and in Revelation 14 we are told what the seal was, is his Father's name written in their foreheads. There are 12,000 chosen from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. In this list of the 12 tribes, the names of Dan and Ephraim are omitted, and the names of Joseph and Levi are substituted. The tribes of Dan and Ephraim were guilty of introducing idolatry into Israel. You can read that in 1 Kings 12 verses 25 to 30. This is likely the reason why they are omitted from the list in this chapter. These two tribes must pass through the tribulation unprotected by sealing. And yet Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel, recorded in Genesis 49:16, and Dan and Ephraim inherit the millennial kingdom, Ezekiel 48. Church or Israel? Some will claim that these 144,000 are symbolic of the church rather than literal tribes of Israel. What does God have to do to convince some people? The 144,000 is a literal number, just like the 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, 2 witnesses, 12 gates, 12 foundations in the holy city, etc. are all literal numbers. These numbers are not symbolic, so why would anyone claim the number 144,000 is symbolic of the church? John specifically says they are children of Israel. If the children of Israel spoken of in Revelation 2:14 is literal, then the children of Israel found in chapter 7 verse 4 must also be literal. It specifically says they are tribes. Since the tribe of Judah mentioned in chapter 5 verse 5 is literal, so must the tribe of Judah and the rest of them mentioned in chapter 7 verse 5 be literal. John spends the next 4 verses of Revelation 7 verses 5 to 8 telling us exactly which Israelite tribes make up the 144,000. Why would John spend all this time describing in detail the tribal makeup of Israel if it had no relevance or was symbolic of the church? Tribe is found 297 times in the Bible, and every time it refers to the Israelites. The word tribe is never used in the Bible to refer to Gentiles. The term Israel is never specifically applied to the church in the New Testament and never by any Christian until 160 AD. John uses the word tribe 2 other times in Revelation, and both instances refer to literal tribes of Israel. In Revelation 21, a description is given of the New Jerusalem. On its 12 gates are written the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel, and on its foundation are written the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Is it consistent to claim the apostles were literal men, but the tribes were not? Immediately after listing the tribes, the prophet sees that a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues. Obviously there is a difference. How can anyone see this as symbolic of the church? This is beyond me. If the 144,000 are a symbol of the entire church, which began at Pentecost and continues to this day, and they are the firstfruits, from 14:4, what greater harvests are the beginning of? It is difficult to imagine the entire church surviving through the tribulation without martyrdom and remaining virgins or celibate through that period, something that was never required of the church as a whole. Some will claim that the group in Revelation 7 is Jewish, but the group in Revelation 14 is the church. If the two groups were different, I think the text would tell us. God is not trying to trick us, and neither is John. He would not represent two distinct groups by such an extraordinary number, and also mention that both groups have the mark of God in their forehead. This group in chapter 14 is the same group introduced in Revelation 7. First fruits. To understand first fruits, the resurrections, and the rapture in certain parts of the book of Revelation, one must understand the figures and types shown us throughout the Bible. The feasts of the Lord themselves are figures and types and speak of three separate phases of one harvest. First fruits and first resurrection does not mean first of any or all, but it means first of its kind. Just as the First Lady in the White House does not mean she is the first lady that ever lived. Shortly after giving the Ten Commandments, God told Israel in Exodus 23 verses 14 to 17, 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread, the feast of the harvest, the firstfruits of thy labor, and the feast of ingathering, which is at the end of the year. 3 times in the year all thy males shall appear before the Lord thy God. I didn't include all the words. You can look these up for yourself. First one is Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread. Leviticus 23:10. Then ye shall bring a sheaf of the firstfruits of your harvest unto the priest. Exodus 23:19. The first of the firstfruits of thy land thou shalt bring unto the house of the Lord thy God. Since Passover was the first of the 3 holidays, the firstfruits of the barley harvest were offered in connection with that holiday. We have a New Testament fulfillment of Passover, 1 Corinthians 15:20. But now is Christ risen from the dead and become the firstfruits of them that slept. And in verse 23, but every man in his own order, Christ the firstfruits, afterward they that are Christ's at his coming. Shavuot or Pentecost, Feast of Weeks. Deuteronomy 16 verse 8 to 10 and Exodus 34:22 if you'd like to look those up. Also Numbers 28:26. Also in the day of the firstfruits, when you shall bring a new meat offering unto the Lord, etc. This feast occurs exactly 50 days after Passover. This feast is a memorial of a much larger wheat harvest and includes waving of 2 loaves of leavened wheat bread before the Lord, unlike all other Jewish feasts that call for unleavened bread. Leviticus 23:17 says, you shall bring out of your habitation 2 wave loaves of 2 tenth deals. They shall be of fine flour, they shall be baked with leaven. They are the firstfruits unto the Lord. And then in verse 20, and the priest shall wave them with the bread of the firstfruits for a wave offering before the Lord. We have a New Testament fulfillment showing the 2 loaves, the Gentiles and the Jews. James 1:18. Of his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that we should be a kind of firstfruits of his creatures. And also we see the rapture in 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 16 and 17. The dead in Christ shall rise first, then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds, etc. And then in Revelation 14:4, speaking of the 144,000, it says, these are they which were not defiled with women. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. Sukkot, Tabernacles, Feast of Ingathering, Leviticus 23:39-41. Also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, ye shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. This is known as the Feast of Ingathering because it occurs near the end of the year at the time of the major harvest of crops. This feast is held with feasting and celebration and involved offerings of the firstfruits of the olive and grape harvest. We see a New Testament fulfillment of this in the ingathering. John 5:29. And shall come forth they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. Revelation 20 verses 4 to 6. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years, but the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. The 144,000 firstfruits, Revelation 14:4. The 144,000 Jews are the firstfruits of a redeemed Israel, which has been previously prophesied, Zechariah, Romans, and others. Romans 11:25-27 says that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, and so shall all Israel be saved. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. Revelation 14:1. And I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. Many Bible scholars consider this to be a scene in heaven, while others regard it as a scene taking place on earth. The difference in viewpoint will seriously affect one's interpretation. I personally believe this Mount Zion, Revelation 14:1, is referring to heaven. Mount Zion, or Sion. Zion is transliterated Sion, Cizon, whatever. I can't pronounce all these words, but you can check it out in Strong's Concordance, and here's the numbers. They are interchangeable in the Old and New Testament. There is a literal Jerusalem and Mount Zion, which is on the earth, but there's also a spiritual Mount Zion and Jerusalem, which are in heaven. We read in the Old Testament that Zion was used interchangeably with Jerusalem, both physical and heavenly. You can see it in these various scriptures. This physical Mount Zion, with their Messiah ruling there, has been the hope of the Jews throughout all the ages. Our hope is in a heavenly city. Here's some New Testament verses about heavenly Jerusalem and Mount Zion. Galatians 4:26. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. Matthew 5:35. Nor by the earth, for it is the footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Jesus was referring to the heavenly city, not the earthly one. He was describing Psalm 48:2, where it says, beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth, is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. Romans 11:26. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. He's quoting from Isaiah 59:20. But here he says he will come out of Zion, and he's coming to Zion. Hebrews 12:22 and 23. But ye are come unto Mount Zion, and unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. Is this Mount Zion spoken of in Revelation 14:1 in heaven or on earth? 1. The Mount Zion on earth is at that time in the hands of the Gentiles, which you can see in Revelation 11:2. 2. It is clearly stated in Revelation 14:4 that these were redeemed from among men, thus implying that they no longer stand on the earth at this moment. 3. Firstfruits are not left in the field, but are brought to the house of God as soon as they are ripe. And since the 144,000 are the firstfruits, they cannot be left in the field, which speaks of the world, but are placed on Mount Zion in heaven, which is the New Jerusalem. 4. They, the 144,000, sing before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders, which are in heaven and not on the earth. 5. The people referred to in 14 verses 1 to 5 are the firstfruits, while those alluded to in 14 verses 14 to 16 are the harvest. If the harvesting is unto the air, can the firstfruits be gathered elsewhere except in heaven? 6. There is no reason to suggest it is the Mount Zion on earth, since Jesus doesn't come back to the earth till chapter 19. 7. Some believe this scene takes place on the earth because of verse 2, where it says, he heard a voice from heaven. They presume that John was on the earth, and so the 144,000 must be on the earth also. I ask, how would John know they were taking place in heaven and before the throne if he was not there personally or somehow seeing it?